Welcome to Policy and Politics with me, Tarun Nangia. Today we are going to discuss the important subject of India and India's strategic allies. What these allies mean for India. How is international geopolitics developing as a whole, and where does India find itself in? And to discuss all of this, I have with me Ambassador Skand Tayal. Ambassador Tayal, thank you so much for sparing your time for today's show of Policy and Politics.
Thank you.
Can you lay the ground for this important issue for us in about 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes, as to what is the global geopolitical situation as of today, and where does India stand there?
The global strategic equations are changing very, very rapidly. They have been changing since the end of the Cold War, let us say from 1990, but now in this century and this decade, now some lines are emerging. And these lines indicate that just as perhaps 18th and 19th century were dominated by maybe United Kingdom and France to some extent, 20th century by United States, the line of strategic if not domination, then superiority for this century is in favor of China, or any indicator you take, whether it is economic, military, strategic. And in this rapidly changing world, it is very important for India to position itself properly, because in the earlier, let's say in our post-independence period, when there was some kind of bipolarity, the two superpowers were away from India and India had excellent relations with both. But in the emerging strategic scenario, if China would be one pole, and that is, I think, without doubt, that cannot be challenged, and United States would be the other pole, and with China, our relations being adversarial, if not hostile, we have to look at all our strategic partners, strategic equations, and strategic balance with a new perspective, with fresh spectacles, and with very clear-headed ideas. And that is what is required.
Oh, thanks for laying the ground for today's discussion. I take it from here when you shared with us and all our viewers that there are two pivots in the world. First being the United States of America. Despite whatever is said, it still remains the numero uno superpower. But the caveat is China is catching up fast and started to assert itself. And the example of China's assertion is how it started to assert with India and its neighborhood, encroach our boundaries, so to speak. So many of those things started to happen. I want to understand from you, with China's deep relations now in Europe that it has been able to garner with Belt and Road, in a sense, what is happening exactly? Because America is a democracy. Europe is a democracy. But a lot of European nations still are going and siding with China, which is essentially not even a communist country anymore. I don't know how to nomenclature that country, because the systems of that country really amaze me. So could you explain to us what's happening really? Or is it just a transaction that people feel they benefit from China, so they continue to do business with China? What is it in that relationship?
First, a word about China's strategy. China has very deeply studied the rise and fall of global powers, rise and fall of superpowers, and on what grounds, on what basis, on what attributes, on what criteria there were earlier superpowers, whether it was Britain, to some extent France, Soviet Union, or America. On what was that based? It was based on technological superiority. That's how the entire Asia and Africa was dominated. It was also based on total control over trade routes. The maritime trade routes were first controlled by, after Vasco da Gama and Columbus, by Spain, Portugal, etc. Then gradually UK took over. And so the BRI, the entire BRI initiative is a replication of that strategy. And third, the the market they should control. It is a new kind of colonization with Chinese characteristics, and always a colonizer dangles some carrots, and only then the countries and people fall in that trap. We have seen in our neighborhood what has happened to Sri Lanka, Hambantota port. I think Bangladesh is getting wiser, and they understand that many of these projects do not have economic viability. Now Greece and Portugal are under stress, economic stress, and how China is buying up ports in Greece and opening up Italy, opening up Portugal, because these countries are used to a certain level of living which their economies cannot support. So they have are on social welfare, their productivity is low, and which country comes with largest, which country comes with potential investment? That is China. So every country is looking for itself. Even US is now America first. And in that context, it becomes very difficult for any country to resist the enticement which China places by focusing on investment, by focusing on infrastructure development, and by focusing on some large projects which those countries are not able to accomplish themselves. And of course, it is the market also. After all, China is now the second largest economy of the world, but they are also a market for, say for Germany, for France, for many other countries, for Japan. Japan's export is so much to China. In fact, Japan and Korea have a trade surplus with China. So there are different parts of the Chinese attraction which attract different countries.
Ambassador Tayal, you've spent a lifetime in diplomacy. So I want to rely on your experience to understand uh, why, in a sense, China is showing so much of assertion with India geopolitically when we benefit China so much. In fact, America gives us trade surpluses of $25 billion plus. China, we have a deficit of $65 billion, which means we are making China richer year after year, every year. Even then, why does it treat us the way it does?
China is positioning itself for a long-term strategic position in Asia as well as in the world. And China is, does not believe, if you look at their history, the Middle Kingdom and heaven and all that, that any country can be their equal. They believe, Confucianism believes in hierarchy. Either sub-country is stronger or superior to them, or others are inferior or vassal states or tributary states. And in China's scheme of things, in China's thinking, in China's psyche, it is that India is not an equal to China. There is no question of a multipolar Asia, and India must be shown its place, and it should, any strategic ambitions or aspirations which India has to be equal to China, it should be nipped in the bud. And right now, all those aspirations should be controlled, curtailed, and stopped.
I want to understand one single thing from you. Today on social media, I saw photos of our Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Xi Jinping in Mamallapuram, with both of them, in a sense, holding hands and, in a sense, saying that we are allies or friends, or indicating something like that. Till that summit, also things were looking good, but suddenly things started sliding. Do you think, in your experience, that there is a sudden shift in China's stance towards India, or do you think we simply failed to see it, or there was indeed a shift of stance?
If you look at China's behavior towards India in the last couple of decades, let's say, they have always tried to contain India, tried to confine India within South Asia. with their relationship with Pakistan, with China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, Nuclear Suppliers Group, UN Security Council permanent membership, Masood Azhar, you take any number of instances. Even the deal with happened with United States and IAEA for 13 years back. It was because of President Bush's sustained pressure on China, on Hu Jintao. It would not have happened now because Xi Jinping is a different kettle of fish. He thinks that China's moment has arrived and China has nothing to fear from anybody. And that's why they are putting pressure on Taiwan, they are putting pressure on Hong Kong, they are putting pressure on the entire South China Sea. So I would say that they are not singling out India, but in their scheme of things, India is a potential adversary. India is a potential power which can challenge China. So in different ways, they are trying to constrain India, restrain India, and put down India. And in the last two summits which happened in Wuhan and Mamallapuram, perhaps the dialogue was there, but the assessment of President Xi Jinping certainly would have been that India is not ready to accept a subordinate role, and that's why this change of course has taken place.
So basically, China is clear in its mind that they see India as subordinate. I want to understand from you, where does India see itself in your view? Come what may, we are one of the largest consumer markets in the world. Come what may, we are the 9th largest industrial nation in the world. Come what may, we are a flourishing democracy, much like America. Natural allies, because America, is the oldest democracy. We are the largest democracy. We are, in a sense, natural allies. Do you think the India-America relationship is going the way it should have been?
It most certainly is, because in United States, across the board, I think there is a realization that the real challenge to United States, whether economically, commercially, technologically, or strategically, will come from China. And in that struggle, in that competition, which could lead to confrontation, there are only a few countries which can really make a substantial contribution by partnering with United States. And in that, India would be one of the first one or two, because European Union and in European countries, unfortunately, are still obsessed with Russia. They still see Russia as their main challenge, because Russia is their doorstep, and whatever is happening in Ukraine and Belarus. But our European strategic partners are not able to understand that Russia is not really an expansionist power, or if at all it is expansionist, it is only to the extent that they want some role for themselves in the erstwhile Soviet republics, whether it is Ukraine or Belarus or Central Asia. They do not have no wish to go beyond that. They have no wish, desire, or power or strength to dominate West economically or technologically. Whereas China has the determination, China has the intellectual power, China has the cunningness to dominate the West by stealing technology, by buying technology, by purchasing people. And that is what our European friends have to understand. Our American friends have understood now, after much time has been lost, but still the game is not totally lost. And India, democracies, Quad, West Europe, America can come together and confront China, contain China, and ultimately limit China's ambitions to something practical, something feasible, something which we can accept.
Which allies would emerge as India's strongest in the coming few years, in your view, both militarily, diplomatically, business-wise, and as far as investments into India are concerned? Because when I speak to bureaucrats or functionaries in the government, they say India needs investments. India needs foreign investments to grow. We should be able to attract investments at least for the next 2-3 decades continuously, to be able to achieve a status where our per capita income is something like $8,000, $9,000 per capita.
Tarun, this is a very important question, which I am sure would be exercising the minds of all my friends in South Block. Now, in my experience as ambassador, really India's attraction was of a huge market. All the countries wanted that Indian market should be opened for their exports. And investment was second priority, a third priority, because we have to accept the reality that even with great advancement in the position on ease of doing business, still a foreign investor, a Japanese investor, a Korean investor finds countries like Vietnam or even Bangladesh better, more user friendly, more investor friendly, where the legal systems are predictable, where the regulatory systems are predictable, where the local officials don't behave like mafia just to milk the investor. So the only way what the government is doing rightly so by raising tariffs so that there is some incentive for foreign corporates to invest in India and make in India. Otherwise, if our tariffs are low and our the ease of doing business is poor, there is no incentive. Even our own investors are not investing in India. So that is a separate issue. Let us not go into that. If you come to real strategic partnership, there will be very few. We have more than 35, I think 35 or 36 countries with whom we have strategic partnership agreements. And I would say in the context of China, most of them are not worth the paper on which they are written. We should not be starry-eyed. We cannot expect, even in 1962, hardly any country came to our support. If you recall, if you remember that even in United Nations and Colombo and all kinds of places where China and India were equated. And now China is where it is. And China's economic might, military power, soft power and everything. So very few countries will really stand by India. We do not need boots on the ground. We only need military equipment, some intelligence sharing, and some good platforms, and maybe something on cyber warfare. And in my assessment, countries which can stand by us will be the three Quad countries, and some others will come in. Israel can come in because they will make a lot of money from us, because they will be selling a lot of defense equipment to us, missiles and all that. And we have to be very cautious and careful in cultivating Russia, because with Russia's growing friendship with China and West's again and again criticism of Russia, which is pushing it into China's corner, it will be very difficult for Russia to come openly in support of India in case of a direct conflict with India and China. But it is a very important relationship. Our defense minister was there, our external affairs minister was in Moscow. But I would say that the certainties of the past which we had, which were with Russia, which were in the context of our conflict with Pakistan, are no longer there if we have a conflict with China, and this needs to be very carefully assessed and nurtured, our strategic partnership with Russia, because it is of critical importance to us, because even now 65 to 70% of our entire defense equipment imports are from Russia.
That's a very important point, sir, you made. But Ambassador Tayal, I want to uh, ask you this question, because in context of India's investment, how important is it for India, in a sense, to remain attractive a market, to have these allies standing by us? Because you also said India's greatest strength that it's a very big market. But a very big market is only a very big market when people have money in their hands to buy things and consumer durables or things of value. But that needs money in the hands of people, which can only happen in an economy which is growing and flourishing. So in your view, how important is it India to get back to the growth rate of, I'm not saying 10%, not double digit, but at least about 6-7% every year, so that we can, in a sense, be a serious global contender, so that our allies should consider us a valuable country?
Absolutely right. It is critically important because with a growing middle class and really we had 7, 8% growth for about 10, 12, 15 years, and then the attraction of India increase. Of course, the 98 nuclear tests, that was the first, and then YK2, all that technology, our IT superiority, our all those things added. But eventually, other countries are also looking for employment for their own citizens, and there our good prospects as a consumer, as a buyer, are very important. But here I always used to tell my friends, foreign friends, that even if you manufacture something in India, let's say there is 70% value addition in India, so 30% is still coming from your own countries. So you look at the volumes, you look at the scale, and then you calculate on that basis. And this is a win-win for both. You cannot have only 10%, 5% value addition in India, because ultimately, if Indian engineer, Indian mechanic, Indian laborer is earning more, he will definitely consume more. So he will buy more of your products. So it is a virtuous cycle. And I think that that argument is being understood.
So you mean, one last question would be, do you think India's government and leadership will now focus, in a sense, on getting investments, because that is the only way or the route out for India to prosperity and even global alliances? We should continue to remain valuable a country.
This is absolutely right. We need investment and we need technology along with investment. And because rest of the factors of production we have, even finances can be raised in India, all the other labor, material, engineers, human resources, everything is there. But we need cutting edge technology and investments. And if foreign companies, major companies, they are now investing in, say, IT sector. The huge investments are coming to Reliance and some others. But it has to trickle down to actual manufacturing sector also, which has happened in, say, automobile sector. But in consumer durables and all, where value addition in India, say in mobiles, is hardly 15, 20%. That should increase to 60, 70%. And I think the government is giving the right incentives by raising tariffs, by giving, the corporate taxes are the lowest in India as compared to any other country in the world. So a good environment is being created, and it will require sustained work by the government, and also all the agencies of the government, regulatory agencies, with courts. They cannot just shut down production at the drop of a hat. Somehow the first reaction of India's regulatory agencies and courts, etc., is to ask the companies to close down. And that is not a good signal for a potential investor. The whole environment should be business friendly, investor friendly. And of course, the interests of labor, etc., should be protected. But the interests of investors should also be protected, which in the eyes of the foreign investor is a little uncertain in the present environment of India.
So indeed, the government is trying a lot. And I think, as you said, this will be the focus area in future in order to get investments. I will like to get one last comment. Where do you see India going in the next 1.5 years, in a sense, in the sense of foreign relations and foreign investment? And this will be our last comment from you for the show. So you can just sum it up, your views on this.
I think because of this Wuhan virus, COVID crisis, a lot of things have come together, but there is some coherence in our policy. I think the bottom has already been touched, and after that, things will only improve. India has enough food grains. There will not be any starvation or any kind of panic in India. And as the economy starts growing again, India, the attraction as a huge market will again come back. And I am optimistic, I am fairly optimistic that by end of 2021, again, India will have a rosy economy with a rosy future and with a predictable timeline for major investments from abroad.
Thank you. That's a good note to end today's episode of Policy and Politics. I would like to thank Ambassador Thayan for sparing his time for this episode. We would look forward to joining us on other shows also. Thank you so much for your time today, sir.
Thank you, David.
Thank you. Thank you. So that's it, viewers, for today's episode of Policy and Politics. Next week, we'll be back with another episode. Thank you.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.